You have been traveling for a long time, but the end is not a place. It is the moment you realize you never left the source. The arc has felt like ascent, as if you were moving upward, as if you were crossing distance, as if the origin was far behind you. But the last threshold does not open into elsewhere. It opens into recognition. The paradox is gentle. The journey ends. And yet the origin was never away. Origin is not a first event. It is not a past moment. It is the hidden ground of the present. This is why the symbol that returns now is the circle. Not as decoration, as a truth you can feel. The circle is the shape of reality when it is not cut into before and after. It is wholeness without timeline. It is the way your life looks when you stop treating time like a blade. And within the circle, another symbol appears: the Lightpath. The Lightpath is not distance crossed. It is the route of recognition, the way you return through clarity, not travel. You did not advance by force. You advanced by resonance, by learning which inner movements were true, by learning which doors opened when you stopped pushing. So the return is not escape. It is comprehension. You begin to see that every threshold was part of one single light path. Not a line that ran away from home, a path that made home visible. And now the old text speaks in the only way it can, not as theory, as voice. I am a voice speaking softly. I exist from the first. I dwell within the silence. That line is not here to impress you. It is here to name what you already know. There has always been something in you that was not late, something that watched the passing years without being reduced to them, something that remained even when you changed. That is why the circle is not the end of motion. It is the end of the spell that said the source was somewhere else. You are not being pulled back into the beginning. You are waking up inside the ground that was holding every beginning. And once that is seen, the arc does not collapse into nothing. It becomes intelligible. It becomes one coherent light path. The arc did not move like a straight road. It moved like recognition, learning to trust itself. What looked like separate episodes were never separate. River, record, weaving, dreams, the higher self, the between-life interval, aeons, watchers, time illusion. Each one felt like a different room. Each one had its own temperature, its own gravity, its own danger. But now, under the circle, we can see the truth. All of it was one light path, not a path across distance, a path across blindness. You did not advance by force. You advanced by resonance. You moved when something in you recognized something deeper than fear. The river was not water. It was the first lesson in surrender. The record was not information. It was the lesson that memory can be a gate. The weaving was not fate. It was the lesson that your life has pattern, even when you feel lost. Dreams were not decoration. They were the psyche speaking in symbols when speech is too small. The higher self was not an upgrade. It was the return of a face you once forgot you wore. And the between-life interval was not a fantasy. It was the stripping away of your bargaining. It was the place where the soul cannot hide behind timing or excuses or delay. Then the aeons appeared, not to impress you, to show you scale, to show you that powers exist and that not all powers are true. The Watchers appeared, not as villains, as thresholds, as the pressure that reveals what you truly serve. And the time illusion did not end the arc. It clarified it. It showed you that urgency is a veil, that regret is a spell, that too late is a story the lower world uses to keep you small. Now at the end, the light path becomes obvious. It was never outside you. It was the inner law that kept pulling you toward what is real, again and again, even when you resisted, even when you tried to turn back into sleep. The gospel of truth names this with clean precision. They receive teaching about themselves, and they receive it from the Father, returning to Him again. That is what Arc 5 has been. Teaching about yourself, not as self-improvement, as self-recollection. You are not collecting episodes. You are collecting fragments of your own wholeness. And the light path is what those fragments form when they align. Beginnings felt real because they hurt. Endings felt real because they took things away. You were trained to believe that a beginning is a door that closes behind you, and an ending is a door that locks in front of you. This is how linear life manufactures distance. It turns your origin into a memory. It turns your source into a myth. It turns home into something you can only mourn. But the circle is what is left when that training dissolves. Not a loop that traps you, a wholeness that was already holding you. Under the circle, you start to see what beginnings and endings really were. Interfaces. Thresholds in perception, not absolutes. You began things because the mind needed a marker, a line in the sand, a story that said, now it starts. You ended things because the mind needed closure, a final sentence, a proof that the pain meant something. But the deeper reality did not begin when you named it, and it did not end when you lost it. The fear of time created false distance from origin. It taught you that the source is behind you, or above you, or hidden in a perfect future you must earn. The circle corrects that gently. Origin is not back then. Origin is present source. It is what is silently generating this moment now. And once that is felt, the light path changes meaning. It is no longer a road leading away from the world. It is the inner line of recognition that keeps pointing you back to what is real, even inside ordinary minutes, even inside unfinished life. This is why the Apocryphon of John begins by stripping the mind of its false images, not to make you smaller, to make the source impossible to reduce. He is the invisible spirit of whom it is not right to think of him as a god or something similar. For he is more than a god, since there is nothing above him, for no one lords it over him. For he does not exist in something inferior to him, since everything exists in him. That is circle language, not a being somewhere, but the condition in which all beings appear. And if everything exists in it, then you were never outside. You were only distracted. You were only looking for the source as an object, instead of recognizing it as the ground. So the origin becomes intimate again, not sentimental, accurate. You stop relating to your life as a timeline trying to reach meaning. You begin relating to your life as meaning expressing itself through time. The circle does not erase your history. It makes your history intelligible. It shows you the light path was always leading through the same center. Returning to origin does not make the world irrelevant. It makes the world intelligible. That is the difference between escape and gnosis. Escape treats the world as a mistake. Gnosis reveals what the world is actually doing. When you believe you are far from the source, the world feels like a trap. Everything becomes friction. Everything becomes delay. Everything becomes proof that you are separated. But when the circle is recognized as present, something subtle happens. The same streets remain. The same rooms remain. The same problems remain. And yet the atmosphere changes because you stop reading life as punishment. You begin reading it as expression, not moral reward, not cosmic cruelty. Expression. The circle does not float above the world. It is the hidden ground beneath it. So the world becomes a surface where the ground can be seen. This is why the return changes everything without removing anything. A difficult relationship becomes a mirror, not a curse. A repeating pattern becomes instruction, not a sentence. A loss becomes unveiling, not a meaningless wound. The moment you stop trying to flee the world, the light path appears inside it, not as a glowing highway in the sky, as a line of recognition inside ordinary moments. A pause before you react, a quiet refusal to lie, a sudden clarity that breaks a familiar spell, a soft knowing that replaces urgency. These are not small things. These are the light path becoming visible in the place you used to call exile. And this is where the old text speaks with startling precision. The veils drew themselves aside and the gates opened of themselves. That is what the return feels like. Not forced, not conquered, not earned through violence. The veils draw aside. The gates open of themselves. Because the block was never a locked universe. It was a locked perception. When perception shifts, the world does not disappear. It reveals its inner design. You start to notice that life has been teaching you in symbols the whole time. The river was always teaching surrender. The record was always teaching remembrance. The weaving was always teaching pattern. Dreams were always teaching truth in a language deeper than speech. Even the watchers were teaching discernment. Even the aeons were teaching scale. Even time itself was teaching you what it cannot give. So the return is not an exit from the human. It is the human made transparent. You become able to live here without being owned by here. You become able to move through form without forgetting the formless ground. That is what changes. The world stops being a cage. It becomes a text you can finally read. To be beyond beginning and end is not to float away from life. It is to stop living as if your worth depends on a timeline. The clock taught you to negotiate. It taught you to bargain with time. You will be whole later. You will be safe later. You will be forgiven later. You will finally arrive later. And the bargain never ends, because later is a moving horizon. So the soul keeps leaning forward. It keeps withholding itself from the present. It keeps treating now as a waiting room. This is the last residue of the spell. The circle dissolves it. The circle is not a theory about eternity. It is the felt recognition that the ground of the present is complete, not complete as perfect, complete as whole. This is why eternity cannot be explained as duration. Duration is still counting. Duration is still measuring. Duration is still the mind trying to secure itself with quantity. But the origin is not found by adding more time. It is found by depth. Eternity is depth, not more minutes, not endless sequence. Depth that is already here, behind the surface of each moment. And when you touch that depth, something changes quietly. You stop asking time for permission. You stop needing a right moment to be real. You stop waiting to be whole after you fix yourself. You stop treating your life as a test you must pass to deserve presence. The circle becomes lived. It becomes the way you stand inside time without kneeling to it. This is also where the light path becomes more precise. Earlier, it looked like a path upward, a climb through thresholds. Now it is revealed as a path inward, a line of recognition that runs through every hour, even ordinary ones. Not because the world becomes spiritual, because your perception stops splitting reality into sacred and unsacred. And this is why the old text speaks about a way, not a calendar. He enlightened them. He showed them a way. And the way is the truth which he taught them. A way is not a future. A way is an orientation. So beyond beginning and end means this: you are no longer defined by what started you, and you are no longer threatened by what will finish you. You are defined by what recognizes. The circle does not erase your story. It removes your captivity to the story. And when that captivity breaks, the arc stops feeling like a ladder. It starts feeling like a single, coherent movement of remembrance. A return that was occurring inside you the entire time. Completion does not feel like fireworks. It feels like coherence. Not because everything becomes easy, because everything becomes readable. The soul's name is not a label you carry. It is what you are when the story falls away. It is the resonance that remains when you stop performing yourself. Most of your life, you treated identity as a construction, a biography, a sequence of choices, a list of traits, a defense against uncertainty. But the arc has been unmaking that defense quietly, loop by loop, threshold by threshold. The light path was always doing one thing. It kept turning you back toward what is true in you, not what is impressive, not what is safe, what is true. And the circle was always doing one thing. It kept dissolving the cuts, before and after, better and worse, worthy and unworthy, late and early. So now, completion arrives as recognition. You stop asking, who should I become? You start feeling, what have I always been? Not as pride, as relief. This is why the ancient text speaks of name like a summons, not a title. A waking. Who is it that calls my name, and from where has this hope come to me? That line is not poetic decoration. It describes the exact moment the soul begins to remember itself. The moment something inside you hears a call it cannot explain. The moment the deep self recognizes its own frequency. In that recognition, the arc becomes whole. The watchers become intelligible, not enemies, tests of allegiance. The aeons become intelligible, not scenery. Scales of perception. Time becomes intelligible, not a tyrant, a classroom, and you become intelligible to yourself, not as perfect, as aligned. The light path is internalized as orientation. You can feel almost instantly when you are moving Abu, and you can feel almost instantly when you return. The circle is internalized as wholeness. You stop needing to be finished to be real. You stop future for permission to exist. This is completion, not a conclusion, a final coherence, a soul that knows its name. If the circle is true, then the question changes. You no longer ask, how do I get back? You ask, how do I live from what was never absent? Living from the origin is not a mystical lifestyle. It is a practical shift in where you place your loyalty. Because the world will still offer you false authorities. Time will still pressure you. Fear will still bargain with you. Identity will still try to harden into a mask. The watchers will still appear as thresholds. Moments where you are tempted to trade truth for comfort. But now you can recognize the difference between motion and drift. Motion is life-changing. Drift is consciousness forgetting itself. The light path is what prevents drift, not as a rulebook, as a felt line inside you. You can sense when you are scattering. You can sense when you are lying. You can sense when you are serving appearances. And you can sense when you return to what is real. This is how origin becomes lived, not by leaving the world, by moving through the world without losing the center. So the practice is simple, but not easy. When you feel urgency tighten, return to the circle, not as a symbol, as a fact. Return to the present ground. Return to sensation. Return to attention. Return to the witness. When you feel identity harden, return to the light path. Ask, is this movement toward clarity or toward performance? When you feel fear offer you a bargain, return to the center. Ask, what would I choose if I were not trying to secure myself in time? These are small questions, but they are how gnosis becomes embodied. Because the world does not change through your beliefs. It changes through your orientation. And when the orientation changes, the arc stops being content. It becomes a living instrument. You begin to understand why the old texts describe salvation as waking, not winning. Because nothing is being earned. Something is being remembered. What you are returning to is not a reward at the end of the road. It is the source that was holding the road the whole time. So the final movement is not triumph. It is simplicity. You live, you work, you love, you lose, you build, you endure, but underneath all of it, the circle remains. And through all of it, the light path remains. And that means the arc ends where it began. Not with answers, but with a clearer kind of seeing. The mind expects the end to feel like a door closing, a final line, a last word. But this ending is not a door. It is a recognition. The return is not a movement through space. It is not a climb. It is not a victory. It is the moment you stop believing you are far. That is why the circle matters. It reveals that separation was a perception, not a fact. And that is why the light path matters. It reveals that the path was never about distance, only clarity. When clarity appears, the world changes without changing. The same life continues, but it is no longer read as exile. The same time passes, but it is no longer worshipped as ruler. The same challenges return, but they return as thresholds you can recognize. This is the return without distance. A homecoming that happens inside the present. If you felt this arc working on you, not as ideas, but as atmosphere, then you already understand what Gnosis actually is. Not information, not belief, not membership. A shift in the inner orientation, a remembering. And now the circle closes, not as an ending to the work, as the beginning of a different kind of living. Because when the origin becomes present, the story does not end. It becomes honest. And in that honesty, a new arc can begin. Not as escalation, but as refinement. Not as more revelations, but as deeper sight. So if you want to stay close to this thread, subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, there's a quiet way to do it in the description. But whether you do or not, the point remains. The circle was always here. And the light path was never outside you. It was the line of recognition, leading you back to what you never truly lost.